Hi everyone, welcome to Hot Seat with Cognizant Clay. I am your host, Clayton Terrio. Today on the show we have Dr. Rory A. Cooper. He is a professor of biotechnology, biomedicine, and orthopedic surgery at the University of Pittsburgh. Rory actually has 20 patents pending or approved of assistive devices for people with physical disabilities. This is a big one. I hope you enjoy it.
I'm just gonna start recording here. It's so I know, yeah, it's going. I'm, I hope you're good with layman's terms because I think I'm gonna be dumbed down a little bit by you, but we'll see.
Oh, we'll find out.
So first of
I'm sure
all,
you'll be fine.
yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for doing this. I do appreciate it. I'm sure you are quite the busy man, so I do really appreciate you helping me with my cause.
Well, it's my pleasure. I
Um,
could hopefully share the same cause.
yeah, for sure. So throughout all these shutdowns and whatnot, how are you managing? How's it going for you?
Actually, well, I typically actually go into the office about one day a week. It's most people aren't there, and then working from home. It's surprisingly I'm keeping as busy as ever. I mean, it can't go on forever, but there's always lots of things that are really hard to find times to do when you're in the office and I'm trying to design things and build things and design meetings. Or now I'm spending a lot of time writing grants and writing papers. So in some ways it's good. And that also means when we finally can get back to life in a somewhat normal sense, I should have more time for the things that I wasn't able to do while I was at home social distancing.
Right, and like you say, it's a trying time, but at least we do have the technology to do so. I was just watching a video the other day, and they said, imagine we were in the '90s right now. Like we would be so lost. It would be hard.
Yeah, well, either that or we just have to be going to work and taking our chances, right? That's probably what would have happened. So fortunately, that technology is advanced to the point where we can work from home successfully, either short term or even long term.
Right, and so my guests, if they're interested, Rory, you were serving over in Germany with the U.S. Army, and unfortunately, while you were riding your bike, you were sideswiped by a bus and a truck, correct?
That's correct. I was sideswiped by the bus, which pushed me into the truck. So the
And
truck actually hit me head on.
oh wow, so how did you deal with the adjustments that came with that?
Um, well, probably the main thing I did was got involved in wheelchair sports and went back to school. Those were the things that really helped me. And I think the fact that my girlfriend at the time, who's now been my wife of over 30 years, still stuck with me and believed in me. I think those sort of things all played together. And thinking about the future rather than dwelling on the past. I mean, once it happened, and there was no going back and reversing it. So, and I was lucky. I mean, I was a little naive. I lived in a small town and didn't realize that people with disabilities had a poor chance of finding gainful employment. But I think by studying engineering, that was certainly something that helped. That was a little bit unusual, and there's usually a high demand for engineers. And I've been fortunate to be employed ever since I graduated.
Oh wow, well good for you. It's quite the story. Who inspired you the most to stay positive after your accident, would you say?
That's a really good question. I would probably say my wife and my grandfather, whom I was very close to, and then I think that and the wheelchair athletes that I met, including people like your very own Rick Hansen, who is a contemporary of mine and a friend of mine. And so when I got into wheelchair sports and realized that at first I played basketball because that was kind of the popular thing to do, and then I was a runner before, and I found wheelchair racing to be much more aligned with my interests and talents. But it was much easier once I found like-minded people. And then I was very fortunate that when I did my undergraduate studies in engineering, several of the professors, although they didn't have disabilities, they were very supportive of me getting my degree.
Yeah, and that's like you said, family always, I think, plays an integral role, and sports for me personally has really, it's easier to relate to other people, I find, because whether it's individual or a team sport, you have so many people backing you that it really does help to be in that realm, if you will.
It does, and I had a great peer mentor, Tim Davis. He's still a friend of mine, who was wounded in Vietnam as a Marine, and he was, we did basketball together, and we actually did our first wheelchair marathon together, and he brought me to the National Veterans Wheelchair Games for the first time, and that really helped too, to see someone who was still young, but had a few more years of experience, and could kind of show you around the world a little bit and how to adapt to life. And it was good that he was married and had a family, so you could kind of see your future a little bit, but not so far into the future that it was too hard to grasp.
Right, and that's a good lesson. Thank you for sharing that. So you earned a Bachelor of Science and a Master's of Engineering from California Polytechnic State, and you also got your PhD from Santa Barbara in 1989. Can you talk me through a little bit just why you chose to go into engineering?
I chose to go into engineering because my parents had an automotive machine shop, and so I had a bit of a technical background, and I was good in math and physics in high school, and I looked at options for when you're seated, what could you do reasonably well, and also I was young. I was old enough to see the moon landing on television, and was always fascinated by the animatronics and the rides at Disneyland. And so I thought, if I can't be a soldier, then maybe an engineer would be a good option. And also, looked around, and engineers are typically employed. They're pretty safe, even in hard economic times. Because always need engineers to create new products and maintain our infrastructure. And so, and I guess it was the right decision, right? I'm still working.
Yeah, and you're quite the decorated individual, so good on you. It's very inspiring as a disabled person to see that, because it is hard, but like you say, if you fight through it, anything is possible, really. So you started as an assistant professor in 1989, and then you gained full professorship in 1998. What do you enjoy most about teaching, and what is your most memorable moment from being a professor?
Those are great questions. What do I enjoy most about teaching is seeing my students succeed. I think my most memorable moments are and the fact that as I've had some success and been in the field long enough to create opportunities for students with disabilities to study in the STEM fields and open up doors for them. I think it was Martin Luther King said that you should only put your hand out if you're going to give somebody a hand up. Mm-hmm. And I think that's been really important for me, is that I was injured prior to the Americans with Disabilities Act in a world that's entirely different than the world we have today, where you couldn't rent a car, hotels weren't accessible, people could discriminate against you for employment and education. You didn't have to be able, you had no right to fly. And so I was fortunate to be to know people like Judy Heumann, who was the founder of the disability rights movement in the United States, and Ed Roberts, whom I actually worked with on his wheelchairs, and Hale Zukas and those folks. And they were good role models for both working and being advocates. I sort of chose a slightly different path of saying, I think I can work better from the inside and use my technical skills. But of course, that those concepts were instilled in me and helped me to create opportunities for students. And I'm most proud of the students that have gone on with disabilities have gone on to be successful in their own right, as well as the Human Engineering Research Laboratories, which we created with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and the University of Pittsburgh. Also my work with disabled veterans. When I was injured, it was just past the post-Vietnam era, and as I said, my peer mentor was a Vietnam veteran, and a lot of veterans were not treated so well. And so, and 9/11 occurred in 2001, and I was in a position to help. I was very happy for the opportunity to make sure that this generation of veterans had more opportunities and were treated with greater dignity and respect.
Right, and thank you for that as well. That is very, very moving to do that, because like you say, I was interviewing someone the other week and they said, I never planned to be disabled, but what I decided after that is help as many people as you can to succeed and to just live their life, right? Because I watched Crip Camp the other week as well, and Judy Heumann, like, unbelievable. Like, it brought me to tears watching that, because that's revolutionary to do something like that. Like, it's just incredible. And so you have helped countless disabled veterans and other disabled individuals by inventing different assistive devices. Can you recall when it clicked in your brain or in your thought process that you wanted to invent these assistive devices?
Well, I started inventing them out of necessity. When I first got home, I had an 80-pound wheelchair that was made of, chrome steel and a Naugahyde seat. And I thought, I want to go to college in a few weeks. This is going to be almost impossible. And fortunately, my Army buddies did a 5K fun run and raised some money to help purchase a Quadro wheelchair designed by wheelchair athlete Jeff Minabraker. It was a very clever design, not particularly well built by today's standards, or a lot of hand building and hand fabrication. But then I realized that I could, if I became a good engineer, I could use my skills to build technology to make my life better and my friends' life better. And I started building wheelchairs and other assistive devices pretty much right away for myself, because of the fact that my parents had an automotive machine shop and my grandfather was a mechanic and a machinist, both my grandfathers actually. And and it turned out that my friends were saying, hey, can I get one of those too? And can you help me out? And some of the manufacturers actually started reaching out to me. And then when I got involved in wheelchair sports, a racing wheelchair was essentially one of those chromed hospital wheelchairs with the seat sagged and the wheels turned in a little bit, maybe a little smaller push rims in some cases. And I thought two things. I can't use this every day. There's got to be a better way. And this is certainly not what I would call a racing wheelchair. And so that kind of got me started. And then when I was in graduate school, one of my professors, Stephen Horvath at Santa Barbara, said, you can there's a profession called biomedical engineering with a subfield of rehab engineering And that's what you ought to do. He said, I can't see anybody being able to do that any better than you can. And he goes, and why should people without disabilities be engaged in this if you're not willing to? And that, before that I'd been tinkering with it, but that kind of turned a light bulb on and said, I should just do this for my career.
Right, and that's pretty crazy. What would you say your favorite invention is in terms of the assistive devices? Do you have one?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure I actually have one because I think every single one of them has been invented in order to meet real needs. I mean, it sounds, but I mean, one of the reasons I love this area of work and inventing technologies for people with disabilities is that I get paid in a lot of smiles and a lot of tears. So I'll give you an example. Well, one of them was, so I worked on and patented the joystick algorithms that you use on your power chair, for example, that took lots of people that were not able to drive independently, that they had to have an attendant joystick on the back and their parents would drive them, or they would use a manual chair and they'd be pushed by parents or friends or an attendant, personal caregiver. And so we did that, and we were able to open up driving independently for literally tens of thousands of people now over the years, literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And when you see people, when we provided those to the first people and they drove for the first time.
Incredible.
It was life altering, right? It was incredible.
Yeah, and that's I can relate because Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is progressive, so I get weaker, but the amount of things that have helped me, it's you just want to cry because you're just so happy that, you're able to have that quality of life that I couldn't imagine it 40 years ago. It would be horrible. Like it's really good. It's really good to see that. And you have, due to all this service and dedication, you have been honored with several awards. What would you say are your favorite and most proud achievements?
That's a great question. Well, my most proudest achievement are my students and the alumni that have done out there. And probably my other is that I convinced my wife to marry me and stay with me. But I think I actually think of awards in maybe a little bit different way. I'm most proudest of the awards that are kind of mainstream awards. So they're unrelated to whether I have a disability or not, or because they help bring recognition to what people with disabilities can do. So, for example, when I was elected into the National Academy of Inventors, or became a fellow of the Associate for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, which is the professional society that manages the journal Science, which is sort of the most highly, one of the most highly regarded scientific journals in the world. So that means that I was able to show that a person with a disability could be there at the highest levels of science or highest levels of invention, along with other people. When I was inducted into the National Academy of Inventors, there were 2 Nobel laureates were inducted in the same year and literally sat next to me.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
So that doesn't really get much more mainstream than that.
Exactly, and I like that answer because as a lot of people, they'll pity people in wheelchairs or whatever, and it's like, we just want to be treated like everybody else. We're no different. My wheelchair is not me. My wheelchair is what gets me around. It's I want to be seen as a human, and I'm sure you're very much the same. You're in a line of work that it's for everybody, and good on you for getting those awards, because I've done quite a bit of research on you. It wasn't the easiest, but there's a lot of cool things in there, and my favorite personally is the new chair. That is amazing. Like, just completely on compressed air. Like, that just opens up so many opportunities.
Well, the new chair is another. I didn't really mention the new chair because it's a fairly new invention, but the new chair, I think, is also transformative in the fact that, and that was another one's hugely, rewarding in the fact that when kids were able to go to water parks and squirt their brothers and sisters and their friends with super soakers and splash pads and things like that, and it's hard not to tear up when mothers and fathers come and, thank you for opening up those opportunities for their children, right? And that's why we do it. And like with the awards, it's not only showing that we can participate in society, but that we can contribute and be competitive in society.
Very true. Very.
You're giving us the opportunity. Some of us can play at the highest levels.
Exactly, and that's I think what everybody strives for in the disabled community, is just to fit in and contribute. So I'm just gonna stop questions here just for the rapid fire segment, just to get to know you a little bit better. So you're a professor in Pennsylvania, however, you were born in LA. Who is your favorite Californian?
Wow, my favorite Californian. That's actually really a tough question. I never even thought about that as who's my favorite Californian. I guess I would have to say, you know what? Well, besides my brother, sister, and my parents, they're still in California, so that's the easy answer. I hadn't really given it much thought, although I will tell you a funny California-related story. When I was inducted into the National Academy of Inventors, the induction was held at Caltech. And Stephen Hawking had spoken a few weeks before I got there. And he went on the same stage that I went on to receive the award. And they built a ramp for the first time. Now, the sad thing is, this was in 2015. And they built a ramp to get onto the main auditorium stage for Stephen Hawking's. And I was the second person to use the ramp.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. What would be your go-to meal? What's your favorite thing to eat?
I am a big fan of tacos and enchiladas, coming with my California background.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a Mexican food. That's definitely one of my favorites. Tacos is I could eat tacos every day, and I don't think I'd get sick of them. Do you watch sports? And if so, what sports are your favorite?
Yes, I watch sports. I'm a huge fan of Olympic and Paralympic sports. I've always been interested in marathons and track and field. I'm also a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, which is our local football team, and those tend to be my favorite sports.
Definitely, football's always a good one. I think that's a very good old American sport, right?
It is. It's a track and field, and it comes from basic because I participated in that as a runner and then as a wheelchair racer, and I enjoyed it at the Paralympics as well. And I pretty much love all the Olympic sports. It's just pretty amazing to see the quality of athlete, and I know that the dedication it takes to get there. And then you can't live in Pittsburgh unless you own several pieces of black and gold clothing. It's a requirement for residency.
Well, there you go. And the Pittsburgh Penguins too. I'm a big hockey fan, and Sidney Crosby is an icon here. So they tend to put a lot of the Penguins games on TV because he is. It's just incredible. It's everything's black and gold there. I love it.
So what's amazing about Pittsburgh is it's like a giant school or high school. The Pirates, the Penguins, and the Steelers are all black and gold.
Yes, very true. And so this might be a tough one, but I figured this would be a cool one to ask. If you could be one inventor from history for a day, who would you choose?
That's a really good question. One inventor from history. Well, I can think of three. Well, I will. Let me throw one out that you're probably not even thinking about. Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, if you could be anybody that's an inventor. Abraham Lincoln, believe it or not, has a patent. And it's for a device to help lift barges off of sandbars.
Oh,
and so
wow.
he was not only a president and a lawyer and a statesman and brought us through the Civil War, he was also a patented inventor.
That's a good one. I like that answer for sure. That's a good one. I didn't know that. Thanks for the little history lesson there. And the last question, just a little funny one here. Judging by your resume, you get about 5 minutes of free time a day. What do you do with your downtime?
So I like to watch sports. I like to participate in sports. I still hand cycle and do marathons when I can, and that's both a form of exercise and stress relief for me. And I enjoy movies as well.
Oh, movies. Yeah, always. Especially right now. I think movies are a lifesaver for a lot of people during this pandemic for sure. Actually, I do have one more question. So I was a big fan of the show, The Big Bang Theory, and I know it's a very Hollywood representation of science, but are you more of a Sheldon Cooper type or are you more of a Leonard Hofstadter type?
So I hope to be more of a Leonard Hofstadter type. My wife might argue with that a little bit. She probably would say I'm some sort of combination of Leonard Hofstadter and Sheldon Cooper. Although I do use the Big Bang Theory in a lot of when I do my introductory remarks at talks and talk about that my cousin Sheldon. And so, yeah. Well, I mean, my wife and I are both fans of the Big Bang Theory. When I was inducted, my wife at Caltech for the National Academy of Inventors, my wife Rosie came with me, and not only to celebrate, but she largely wanted to see get a tour of Caltech.
Oh wow, that's pretty cool.
So she was a little disappointed that it was actually much nicer than it's portrayed in the Big Bang Theory. But yeah, I think, of course, Howard Wolowitz was an astronaut, as he's an engineer, and so of course there are other character Kuthapali and Leonard and Sheldon are all physicists, so there's a little bit of picking on the engineers there. But I would argue we can hold our own.
Oh, for sure. I think so too. For sure. So getting back into the questions here a little bit. So you were talking about sports. Over the years, you have had a prominent role with the U.S. Paralympic team, including winning bronze in the 4x400 at the '88 Olympics. What improvements have you seen in the Paralympics in terms of viewership and awareness?
I think the progress in the last 3 Paralympics was quite remarkable. I think London was a true turning point in that in London and in Rio, that both of those, the opening and closing ceremonies sold out, which was pretty amazing for the Paralympics. And and in Rio, all the tickets sold out, which is really awesome. I think the athletes have always been pretty amazing. The technology is advanced to the point now that I think the average viewer that doesn't understand the sports for people with disabilities just sees it as amazing athleticism and amazing sport. And I think that itself is pretty tremendous. And I think that the changes in the depiction of the Paralympics and the athletes in the Paralympics is transformed from more of a, oh, this is an interesting thing that these people with disabilities can do, to this is sport, right? This is and sport at the highest level.
For sure. And I was talking to my dad earlier, even on TV, the last Olympics was the first time in Canada that the entire thing was broadcast on TV, which to me should have happened a long time ago, but it's also, like they say, it doesn't have the sponsor money that the normal Olympics has, but at the same time, it's really quite amazing. And even the Invictus Games, Prince Harry with all the veterans, like it's very inspiring to see that, because like you say, the technology now, it's just like normal sport, and it's really quite remarkable to see it.
Well, I think in other countries did the same thing. So it's pretty amazing. The United States hasn't quite got to that point. They did show some of the Paralympics, but not as much as other countries. But Canada in some ways led the way. If you remember your Canadian sports trivia, Wayne Gretzky and Rick Hansen received the Canadian Athlete of the Year award together.
Yeah, I do remember that. And even Gretzky going to LA was big because it put Canada on the map too. I think that was a big starting point for leading the way as well. And it's pretty awesome to see that, for sure. Apart from engineering, what kinds of charity work and advocacy do you do for the disabled community?
That's a great question. I do a lot of advocacy work for veterans organizations, primarily the Paralyzed Veterans America and the Wounded Warrior Project and Student Veterans of America. And I helped push for opportunities for student veterans with disabilities. And then I've been engaged with Easter SEALs since I was injured, and even served on the National Board of Directors, and I'm an emeritus board member for Easter SEALs. And then, of course, I'm involved in a number of other organizations, locally and nationally. I still I serve on that Paralympic Committee's scientific committee, and to advocate, and I'm also on the International Society for Physical Rehabilitation Medicine's committee on adaptive sports and recreation for people with disabilities, to try to promote around the world for ways for us to stay healthy and engaged in our communities.
Very good, and giving back is big for me as well. Easter SEALs has served a very big purpose, if you will, in my life, and it's really good to see that. What is there anything else, or is that pretty much it? I'm sure you're pretty busy, so.
I'm pretty busy, and I mean, I'm involved in organizations at various levels, locally, regionally, nationally, advocating. I've had the good fortune of meeting with heads of state in the United States, and actually in Canada, and other countries around the world, to advocate for the rights of people with disabilities. And it certainly helps when they can introduce you as a distinguished professor and the head of a national laboratory. it's pretty obvious that I have a disability, so you don't need to talk about that. And you know, and a lot of times it's pretty funny that when I've met them or corporate leaders, I think that what they're most impressed by is that I have a PhD in engineering. It's that in itself, people know that it's hard to get one of those.
Oh yeah, it's especially with the disability, like you said, when you went there, it was very different than it is now. A lot less assistance and advocacy for the disabled community. So it's definitely good to have on your resume. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, when I went to school, I had to be carried into certain labs, and you know, I had to work at makeshift lab benches and build my own equipment in order to be able to do some of the things that I was supposed to be learning how to do. So it was very, very interesting. But you know, somebody has to open those doors, right? And people like Terry Fox and Judy Heumann and others opened up doors in other areas. And so I was fortunate that I got to play my own small part in opening up doors in the engineering fields.
Well, and I thought my biggest problem when I went to college was a broken elevator, but I think you win that one.
Yeah.
So in terms of education and the engineering field, what advice would you give to young boys and girls who want to pursue a career in engineering?
Start early. You really have to start in middle school. So one of the advantages that I had is that I was injured in the Army. So I had already taken all the middle school and high school scientific science and mathematics preparatory courses. But unfortunately, a lot of kids with disabilities don't have those same opportunities as the counterparts without disabilities, and they and their parents need to advocate for them with their teachers in their schools, because we don't want to lose the next Einstein because they didn't have the opportunity when they were in middle school or high school. I think if you have a good, strong foundation, you work hard, you can succeed in STEM fields, including engineering, in college, all the way through to the doctoral level. One advantage I think we do have is that if you're going to, most people with disabilities tend to be organized. So it's just, you can't succeed even just in managing your daily life with a high degree of discipline and organization, which helps you when you go on to college, especially in fields like engineering.
Yeah, for sure. Being disabled, I'm very, by the book and very, very regimented, and I think that does help. That's a very good point, because we, able-bodied people don't have to worry about, if the bathroom's accessible or if they can fit through a doorway, whatever it is. It's very good experience, if you will, to be able to deal with things like that. And, well, that's about all I have, Dr. Cooper. Thank you so much for doing this. I really do appreciate it. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you, Clayton. I'm happy to be on your podcast. It was a real pleasure to meet you as well, and I wish you all the success in the world.
Thank you very much. I'll send a link out to you and Heather as soon as I post it.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Take care. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.